round number 7 of the Gashimov Memorial. And what a matchup we have. It's Vasilin Topalov, the leader with the black pieces, on +2. And with the white pieces, the world champion, he's on +1, half a point behind Topalov. And Topalov has been playing excellently in this tournament. Very exciting chess, reminiscent of when he was world number 1 some years ago, and of course FIDE world champion. So he's leading Magnus and Giri by half a point. And with only 3 rounds to go, this is prime opportunity for Magnus with the white pieces to try and catch up with Topalov. And he decides to go with the English opening, which is a flexible choice, most often avoiding heavy theory and getting, in many cases, interesting middle games. After knight f6, knight c3, Topalov opts for e5, and we have a Sicilian with colors reversed, knight to f3, knight c6, and e3. Now d5 would give us a pure open Sicilian with colors reversed, with white having an extra tempo, but bishop c4, b4 introduces some sort of Rosalimo type reversed Sicilian. Magnus goes for queen to c2. Now usually when you play queen c2, the idea is to take on c3 with the queen when black takes. Topalov took on c3, so therefore I was slightly surprised when I saw b takes c3. Because why would you move your queen here and not take on c3? Usually that's the idea. But here he takes with a pawn. After d6, perhaps one of the ideas is exposed here with e4. At least the pawn is protected now. And yeah, Magnus didn't fancy black playing e4 himself at some point. So e4. Castles. And now g3. Now why g3? Well, it's clear that, okay, we need to develop this bishop. And then we have to get castled. And after that, we have to do something with our pawns, some pawn breaks. So we can try to play d4, or we can try to play f4. If you play g3, like Carlsen did, once the bishop arrives on g2 and we go for the plan with d4, then the bishop is giving added protection to e4. And if you go for the other plan, which is to play f4, our pawn on g3 will be useful in providing backup for the pawn coming to f4. So g3 makes a lot of sense. The next few moves also make a lot of sense. Knight e8 prepares f5. Knight h4 prevents it. Knight d7 puts it back on the cards. d3, solidifying the center, opening up for the bishop. And after f5, white kind of has to take. If it doesn't, let's say, yeah, bishop d2. Black has a pleasant choice between f4 or even taking on e4, because white never wants to take back with a pawn, which would give him a horrible structure here on the c file. So these c pawns, if you lose a d pawn, you lose all dynamics with the pawns, and they become that much more weaker. So you know, keeping the d pawn is very important for the double pawns. But okay, after f5, we have mass exchanges on f5 and bishop d2. And aside from white having a bishop here, it has to be said that black is very solid and probably has no problems. And I think we have an equal position here with equal chances. So equal doesn't always mean drawish. I think, you know, the pawns are not symmetrical, though, so there are plenty of imbalances. So either side can try at some point to, you know, to play for the win. So this pawn is attacked. c6 prevents that attack and prepares d5 in some cases. h3 and knight c7. A very logical question is why not queen d7, because this battery prevents castling, and I think white has to go g4 here to prepare castling in f4. But it does weaken the king, so I don't know. To me this looks like a very viable option, but Topalov went for rerouting the knight to c7, castles, knight to e6, bishop e3, and knight c5. A very nice square for the knight. Now we have a concentration of forces on a d3 square, and white can't really take on c5, even though it's double pawns. The most important factor is the pressure on d3, which is becoming quite significant. So Carlsen doesn't do that. Instead, after knight to c5, he plays rook a to d1. Queen d7 now, attacking h3, so the king protects it. Bishop to g6. And now rook d2. So Carlsen is sort of, you know, reinforcing his central files here. At some point, black is going to increase the pressure against d3. So rook d2, very useful. Rook a to e8, queen d1, b6. Still, this must be dynamically equal, and it's hard for anything to happen without, you know, either side taking a bit of a chance. We have h6 from Topalov, and now Carlsen decides to change the structure with bishop takes c5, giving up the bishop pair. But after d takes c5, there's pressure on d3, but also pressure on e5. Carlsen plays rook e3. This gives added pressure to d3, but also prepares some doubling on the e file, because we also have a weakness here. Now rook e6 by Topalov. This rook is going to d6. So I was slightly surprised. Why wouldn't you go rook f6 with the same idea? Because you keep the other rook on the e file protecting the pawn. And it turns out later that this could have been quite useful. Going back, you have to rook e3, rook to e6. Carlsen played king g1. I guess he found some variations where he wanted his pawn on f2 protected. Rook to d6, h4. Okay, I guess the idea is not to have a unprotected pawn on h3. So h4. It's also logical in a way that it, you know, tones well with the bishop, as they say. Pawns on black squares and a light squared bishop works very well together. Rook to d8, not tripling on the d file, and a sitting duck here. But it turns out rook e8 was a better move, and therefore, when you played rook e6 to d6, why not rook f6 to d6? That way you already have this formation, and maybe you even save a move in some way. But after h4, rook to d8, and this turns out to be a mistake. Carlsen takes on e5, and now there's a dilemma. Rook takes d3 is very tempting, but white has a nice tactic here. Bishop d5 check. A very nice interposition on the d file, and after c takes d5, rook takes d3, bishop takes, and now the Schutzenzug, rook takes d5, followed by taking on d3. White has an extra pawn and nice control over the d file. So Topalov didn't go for this, he played bishop takes d3, but now bishop e4. And here Topalov had to find the very difficult move, king to f8, which covers the back rank with the king. But he didn't find it, he played bishop takes c4. Now what's the problem here? A very nice tactic, a classical tactic in a way. And Carlsen doesn't miss his chance, he takes on d6. And what's the idea here? White to move, and basically more or less win. Can you find it? Carlsen played rook to e8 check. Of course, rook takes, loses the queen. Black does get material, and king f7, well, it loses a whole rook. So black has to, we have this very nice x-ray here, the queen protects the rook through the queen. So we have to evaluate what can we do. Actually, the best thing is to capture on e8 and give up the queen. So that's what Topalov did, and now he took on e4. And after queen takes e6, we have a queen against a bishop and a rook. So 9 points against 8, so essentially Carlsen is 1 unit up or 1 pawn. He plays king h2. No, it's black to move, rook e1 check, and then king h2. Probably doesn't want to be on this diagonal if he moves his queen, giving a check. Bishop takes a2 and g4. The natural move is to give check and take this pawn, and there's nothing wrong with that. Might be the best move, but my computer was showing g4 as the best move. So all due respect to the world champion, he knows what he's doing. Now g4, it does prevent h5 in some lines, which can be useful in trying to set up a fortress, and it also gives our king the g3 square in case we move the queen somewhere and we're not worried about a checkmate threat on h1. Okay, king h7. Carlsen keeps moving forward on the king side, f4, and now h5. So a very human move. He's trying to build some kind of fortress. If you play g5, then maybe bishop to e6 or bishop to b1, and our idea is to get the bishop here, the rook back at some stage, and then maybe we can even cement the bishop with g6 and have a fortress with the rook on the 7th. So black is always trying to find a fortress in these positions. G takes h5, rook e6, and this might be very close to a fortress. Let's say queen here, rook here, queen takes a7, and I think if you get the bishop on f5, it's very hard for white to make progress. So I'm thinking, can we play bishop b1 here? So my idea is simply to put the bishop here, then moving back and forth on this diagonal, and the rook is covering everything here. And I don't see, you know, at a quick glance how white makes progress, either with the king or how he makes a pass pawn. I just don't see it. So Carlsen, fully aware of these things, plays f5, not allowing, crucially controlling this square and opening up some ideas here. So, okay, this is a long game, so we'll try to speed it up. H takes g4, h5. Maybe not the best move, but okay, it has a clear idea just to try to push the pawns forward on the king side, make something happen. Bishop f7, now queen b7, nice move. Bishop takes h5, f6, turns out you can't defend this. So what to do? Topalov played king g8, protecting the bishop, but now queen takes a7. Checking here and taking the, move later was definitely an option. But now bishop takes h5, queen takes b6. So, from the starting position of this endgame, white has actually lost a pawn, but okay, this is not a strong pawn. And he's, threatening the c pawn now, and if he can do that, he can make a pass pawn, which will be very strong. So Topalov tries to hold on to the pawn, c4, but now queen d8 check, bishop e8, the king comes to collect the g pawn, and queen c7, and somehow very nicely we have rounded up this pawn. The logical question is, can we hold on with rook to e4? No, we can't actually, because f6 is now a threat, just like before. So king g8 by Topalov, but now the c pawn drops. Queen takes c4 check, and now Carlsen starts to move his c pawn forward, c4, c5. Very logical play here. Queen d5 check, followed by moving the c pawn. And here, perhaps a crucial moment, Topalov took on c6 with the bishop. But I'm still trying to find the win if he just goes bishop a6. Carlsen says I don't believe in fortresses, but I'm not entirely sure how white breaks this down. Okay, let's say king takes d4, break up bishop c8. Let's say queen somewhere, king g8. So my idea is basically I would go back and forth with the rook, back and forth with the king. F-pawn can't move really, and the c-pawn is blocked by the rook and the bishop. How do we make progress here? I don't know. So just trying something here. Rook f6, c7, rook back, queen check, king here, rook here, queen d5. Okay, maybe we're making some progress now. Maybe queen d8. But then we can take here. Notice that black can't take here because queen takes, bishop takes, king takes, and the c-pawn decides. But I haven't found the win here. If you find the win here, you know, let us know in the comments. It's a very interesting position to know if there's a fortress here, because Topalov took on c6, which is probably the losing move if bishop a6 is a fortress. Now queen g6 first, now he takes, and rook f6. Topalov was pinning his hopes on this being a fortress, the rook going back and forth between f6 and h6, but I think Carlsen knew better. This is a winning position, and he found the plan fairly quickly. Queen e6, Zugzwang. The rook can't stay here because now we take it. Let's look at the options. Rook f6, trying to hold on to the fortress. Now we take. The king is coming here and the pawn runs. Very simple. The other idea is to, well, take, but now we take with the f-pawn. And again we're queening, king here, king, and pawn. So this means that after queen e6, the rook has to run. So actually Topalov resigned here. Let's look at the sample line. Rook to h2, queen g6, king h8, and f6. And you can't defend this. Rook h7 allows checkmate in 1. Even if it didn't, f takes g7 is very close to a theoretically winning position, Philidor position. And taking here, this will end up in your rook being checked off the board. Let's have a sample line. Queen here, king here. You know, basically through some checks, we're going to king f6, threatening mate. We have to give a check. Now king here, the queen covers the checking square. And now the rook is in no man's land. It has to go to a bad square where the queen will capture it. Let's try something like rook b2. Queen f5. Okay, and here, and we take the rook. Game, set, match. So a very nice win, and a very important one by Carlsen. I remind you, he didn't lose in Grenke, and he hasn't lost yet in this tournament. So playing very solidly, and he's also facing opponents most of the time that are playing for a draw. But in this one, he faced a guy playing well in the tournament, and you know, he went for his own chances. So we found an interesting game, and Carlsen prevailed. So you know, the World Championship match is looking very interesting indeed. I think the top 2 players in the world right now, Carlsen and Caruana. You know, that's the best matchup, and we're looking forward to it. But for now, let's wait to see what happens in Shamkir and the US Chess Championship. 2 rounds to go in Shamkir, and Carlsen is leading again. So 2 rounds remaining. I'll try to cover them. I'm going to a tournament myself, but I should be able to make videos, and I'll try to do that. And I'll see you then. Thank you. Bye bye.